Day one begins. Benjamin and I out for a walk, strolling through the hood. Yeah, it's a beautiful day. Beautiful day. And so, Daddy Daycare begins. How you doing, Benjamin? Are you afraid? Are you afraid that Daddy's taking care of you now instead of Mommy? I know, a tough life. So today is Tuesday, December 17th or 18th, something or other. Don't really remember. Not important. But the first day of Daddy Daycare. Be watching Benjamin all day at home while my wife is at work, and then I'll be picking Charlie up at 6. So a bit of a different schedule. I'm gonna see if I can be squeezing in some poker at night. Christmas is coming up, and we're gonna be going to my in-laws for like about a week. So once again, not really sure how much poker is gonna be going down, but you know, switch up a schedule. So it'll be nice to spend time with this little guy. Right, Benjamin? Right, Benjamin? What's going on with your hair? Yeah, you're preoccupied. Really is awesome to be able to have this freedom to take some time off and spend it with this little guy, because they're only this small for so long. All right, signing out. Say bye-bye, Benjamin. Bye-bye. With baby Ben taking a nap over here. Actually, maybe now he's awake. Might have woken him up with my loud-ass voice. Whoops. Anyway, it's time to jump into the poker action. We're going to be jumping right back in where we left off with the next session after our vacation. Let's get to it. He's back asleep. You know what the most annoying thing in poker is? I'll tell you right after this message. Are you tired of traveling all the way to your local casino only to finally be seated and find yourself surrounded by antisocial wizards? You know the type, iPad watching, headphone wearing, nits who only give action when they have the nuts? Well, we have the answer to passive-aggressively display your disdain for these such players. Introducing anti-nit poker hoodies. Also available in these fine t-shirts. Check it out at antinitpoker.com. It's when some bonehead decides to do something completely out of the ordinary, just something that he just never ever really does, and costs you a giant pot. Yeah, this is me complaining, and I'm frustrated right now, so we're going to share this hand. I get pocket 4s late into my session. I decided to limp after another limp. There's another limp after me. Now the button, who is kind of an action player, makes it $30. And now this nitty guy who's kind of been losing and a bit frustrated and annoyed decides to make it 105 out of the small blind. Obviously, I'm not limp calling 105 when the guy's playing like $500. So I fold. The player who opens calls, and the flop comes King Jack 4. So yeah, it's like, okay, no big deal. You would have flopped the set, right? Now here's the annoying part. The guy in the small blind just opened jams like 400, and the guy that opens snap calls, and I'm like, oh man. Turn is a 4, so I would have made quads. And no, not only, it's not that I cracked kings or jacks here. It's that, first of all, the small blind had king 6, which I just don't get at all. It's something that he just never does. I have no idea what inspired him to suddenly decide to 3-bet in this situation and get out of line. Then he open jams this flop for 2x pot, where he's only getting called if he's beat. So I don't know what he's doing. And the guy who opened pre-flop has King Jack offsuit and flops top 2. So I would have flopped bottom set versus top 2. Obviously stacked that guy for over $1,000. There's no doubt in my mind that this guy is, not getting it all in with top 2 pair on this board. I obviously would have check raised the flop, and we're just going to get it in here. And of course, to boot, I would have turned a 4 for quads, which is a bonus at this casino, and I would have got an extra $100 as well. So pretty frustrated. Given just a number of events that happened towards the end of my session. I did leave a winner, so let's get into the other hands of note. I've got a couple of fun ones. Early on in my session, I get pocket queens in early position. I open to 20, folds to the small blind, who's a bit of an action player. He calls, and now the big blind, a female, middle-aged Asian lady, calls as well. We go 3 ways to a flop of 9-6-4 with 2 diamonds. Now the small blind just open jams 114 into like the $60 pot. The Asian lady thinks we're betting calls, Obviously, this kind of sets alarm bells off in my head a little bit. I am worried that she possibly flopped a set. But on this board, there are obviously a number of draws, some open-ended straight and flush draws, over pairs like pocket tens and jacks. She could be overvaluing a hand like just top pair. So I don't think there's any way I can fold on this flop just yet. If the turn is a diamond and she jams, I think I'm just going to be folding. Or even if the turn's a brick and she just jams or bets large, I might just find a fold here because I don't think she's going to be getting out of line. So I call 114, and the turn's an offsuit deuce, and now she checks. She's playing about like a little under 400, maybe like 380. When she checks here, I just don't think that I'm going to be behind very often. I think she has a set she's going to be betting. Maybe two pairs she should be betting. She should be protecting against this flush draw. And so now, given how much she has and how large the pot is, I don't think there's any point in betting like half pot. If she does have an overpair, I don't expect her to fold very often. And if she has a flush draw, if I bet half pot, she's not going to put any money on the river if she misses. So there's no point in betting like 200 and try to get the other 200 on the river. Because like I said, if she has a flush draw and doesn't get there, she's not going to be paying me. And more importantly, if she does get there, now I'm going to be put in a tough spot if she bets the rest. So I decided to just jam it in there and, try to get value from some of those flush draws, combo draws. Maybe she doesn't find a fold if she has like pocket tens or jacks. Obviously, if I have a flush draw myself, like ace, king of diamonds, something of that nature, I'm just going to rip it in here often anyway. So I jam it in and she snaps me. I turn my hand over as I often do, when I am the one who's betting all in and first to show anyway. So I roll over my pocket queens. And the river's an offsuit queen, so obviously I make the nuts here, or essentially the nuts. I only lose to 5-3 for a straight. And she shakes her head and rolls over pocket aces. So she sure trapped the hell out of me. Didn't see that coming. She said that she put me on like a big pocket pair, so she wasn't really afraid of the flush draw. So she played it pretty much perfectly. By checking the turn, she gets me to commit just all the money. If she bets the turn, like fairly large, I'm probably not going to fold if she bets the turn. But obviously, like I think she is a pretty tight player, so I might have found a fold. So she kind of just played it perfectly to get me to stick all the money in there really bad. Unfortunately for her, I got very lucky to hit the two-outer. In this next hand, I have king-queen suited in middle position. There's an under-the-gun limp, an under-the-gun +1 limp, and another limp. This is generally a slam dunk isolate for me. I don't want to be playing this hand multi-way. I do make some flushes in situations where I can overflush somebody, but it's going to be fairly hard if the flop comes like king 9-6 to navigate in some six-way pots. If I do get check raised or something like that. So oftentimes I do want to narrow the field, and more importantly, I've got a value hand. So I want to play a bigger pot when I rate to have, one of the better hands in this situation. Though the problem here is the under-the-gun player is the type of guy who likes to limp re-raise. So I'm a bit afraid that he could be limp raising something big here. I decide to limp. Now we get like one or two other limpers behind me. The blind's in. I think we go like 7 ways to a flop of king 9-4 rainbow. There is no club, so I don't have a backdoor flush draw. And now I think it's very important. See, the lesson from this hand for me is to pay attention to your table. It's very easy to get caught up looking at your phone, not paying attention to everyone. But any given time that you're in a hand or decide to play a hand, you should really be paying attention, because paying attention in this pot really got to save me some money. I noticed that the big blind, this older Asian gentleman, kind of does this thing where he looks down at his chips real quickly, and I just get this sense that he likes his hand and wants to bet. He ends up checking. The limpers check. I decide that I'm going to be bet folding here. Sometimes obviously I have misreads in these situations where I think someone has a big hand and they end up just not having anything at all. So I want to bet, and if this guy happens to check raise me or decides to put any significant action, I'm going to be done with the hand. Like I said, there are no clubs on the flop, so I don't have a backdoor flush draw. I do have a backdoor straight draw. So this is not really something I want to worry about, by betting and getting check raised off my backdoor equity if he does in fact have a big hand. So I bet 20 or 25 until like the $40 pot. The player after me calls, and now the older Asian gentleman just calls. We go 3 ways to a turn, which is an offsuit 8. Again, he does this thing where he kind of quickly glances at his chips and ends up checking. I just have a bad feeling about it. I decide to check it back. and now the player to my immediate left bets 50. When he does this, I'm fairly sure that I've got the player to my left beat. I think I have him outkicked. I think he specifically has a king 10, king jack. And sure enough, the older Asian gentleman in the blind kind of all of a sudden wakes up, springs to action, and makes it like 160. I pretty much laugh out loud just because I can't help myself that, exactly what I had seen occurred, and more importantly, this player to my left wasn't paying attention. So I end up folding. The guy to my left does in fact kind of show me that he has king 10, like shakes his head and ends up folding. And I'm just like, yeah, if you had seen, it looked like he had a big hand, like he wanted to bet. And he's like, oh, I wasn't looking at him. So you know what? Pay attention to your game. Look and see what's going on around you, because so often there are so many tells that people are giving away if you just take a look at them. This hand is another great example of paying attention to your surroundings. I get pocket aces in middle position, and as I go to grab raising chips, the player to my immediate left also goes to grab raising checks, and pretty much I already see him going out to raise. I guess he just hadn't noticed that I hadn't done anything yet. So I just kind of quickly limp along. I don't want him to change his mind and not raise, and as I mentioned, he's already in the process of raising, so it's not some sort of like fake tell. Sure enough, he raises, although he only raises to 15. The small blind calls, and now I decide to limp 3-bet to 65. Obviously, some people might think this is an angle or something like that, but look, if people are going to act out of turn, I'm not going to just raise my own hand here, because he's obviously not going to, or very often he's not going to be 3-betting me, and he's just going to call, and it just doesn't make any sense for me to be raising if I see this player to my immediate left is already raising. So I make it 65. He calls 50 more, playing like about 300 or 250 more, and now the small blind playing about 350 calls as well. We go 3 ways to a flop of deuce 3 5 with 2 hearts. I don't have the ace of hearts. Goes to check. I bet I think 105 or 110 into the nearly $200 pot. The player to my left folds, and now the small blind tanks for a bit, ends up jamming. Obviously I snap, turns an offsuit king, rivers a 5, and he says he has a king. I show aces, and he shows ace king. So a pretty interesting hand for him to just flat here. I see what he's doing. I think on this flop, he rates to obviously have the best hand some percentage of the time. Also, obviously, if he hits a 4, he's very likely to have the best hand with a straight. And you think that if I do have an overpair, an ace or a king should be live. So unfortunate for him that he hits the king and it's no good. We do scoop that pot, and like I said, pay attention to your surroundings. If you have a big hand, you see somebody else is raising already, let them be the aggressor. Let them take care of the action for you. Obviously, in this case, if I had opened, it's quite likely the hand's going to play pretty naturally anyway, because the guy in the small blind has ace king. But if it doesn't get inflated pre-flop, then perhaps we don't get it all in post-flop when it comes deuce 3 5, and he just kind of decides that it's all or nothing for him. In this last hand of note, I'm in the big blind with ace-king offsuit. There is a middle position open to 20. There's a call on the button. Now the small blind jams all in for 74. Obviously, I think oftentimes here I'm going to have the best hand or be flipping against the small blind. I don't want to just call because now I'm going to be out of position to the field. They're very likely to call, and I'm just going to get myself in some awkward spots post-flop. So I decide to re-raise to isolate, get it heads up, and try to, like I said, go against the small blind's all-in range. I make it 175, which perhaps is not enough because I think when the player opens to 20 here, he's playing about 1200, so he might just decide to call off here. The problem is, obviously, if I make it any larger, I also get myself into some really bad spots if now he decides to re-raise. Perhaps 180 is about the sweet spot, and it should deter the player that opens a 20 from getting involved in this instance. Unfortunately for me, he decides to call and put me in some tough spots. The player on the button folds, and now we're going 3 ways with 1 all in to a flop of king, jack, 9 rainbow. I flop top, and what's a pretty dynamic board. I think oftentimes his continuing range here could be 9s, 10s, jacks, queens. Obviously, I'm fairly ahead of the 10s and queens, but they do have gut shots. The player is someone who I've had some history with, so I feel like if I lead this flop, he might float me some percentage of the time and get out of line and put me in a tough spot on a lot of turns. So I end up tanking for a bit and just decide to check. I want to see what he's going to do. I think that, if he bets, I can call, and reevaluate on some turns, slow him down, and just kind of give him some rope if he is behind. So I check, and after a little bit of tanking, he decides to rip it all in for like $1,000, a little over $1,000. I'm just like, holy crap. So my question to you here is, what do you do? This is a player we have some history with. If you've watched the vlog, he's the guy who decided to call my all-in with 5 deuce, I think on the 2-3-6 board when I had ace-4 of diamonds and flopped the gut shot and a flush draw. I ended up missing, and he won with a pair of deuces. So we've had some history. He's done some interesting things. He is capable of getting out of line, but at the same time, I don't necessarily think that he's going to just be losing his mind here with like King 10. I think sometimes he's going to have hands like Jack 9 suited, Queen 10, King Jack, things like that. So, I tank for a while and just decide that, he's going to have a lot of sets here, possibly some, like I said, wonky 2 pairs, and I just decided to fold. I think at worst he's going to have ace-king here, and I'm not even sure if he plays ace-king in this manner. So I decided to fold. The small blind ends up having aces, so, we were dead against him anyway. And the player who did call the 170 pre ends up having pocket 9s for flopping bottom set, and he ends up scooping this one. So pretty fortunate for me that he decided to play it in this manner. Not really sure what he's doing betting this large on the flop. He's just never getting worse to stack off here. If I end up having kings or jacks, he's screwed. And, I might even find like a fold with like aces. I obviously found fold with ace king. So I just don't really like the way he played the hand. If he decides to bet small on this flop, he's obviously going to get a call from me. And I might end up just doubling him up for 1,000. If he bets like 300 on the flop, I'm going to call. And now on the turn, I might end up getting myself in a spot where I'm just like, screw it, I have to call. I've under-rep my hand. He could be getting out of line here. So I don't really know what's going to happen. But what I do know is that when he overbets this flop, he's, sure enough, going to be getting a fold from me. Like I said, I really hate the way he played the hand. And, calling 180 pre-flop to flop a set and then misplaying it by not getting any value post-flop is pretty ridiculous. Anyway, that pretty much brought the session to a close. I was up around 750 before that hand. After that hand, I ended up being up around 500. After that, I started kind of goofing around, got myself involved in a couple of silly spots, lost 100, 200 at a time. Ended up getting stuck, I think, at some point around 300 or 400. Table changed because the game just wasn't good. I moved over to the other game, ran it up a little bit in that game, and like I said, ended up winning $250. A little small victory. A couple of unfortunate things, didn't go my way. Like I mentioned, that pocket 4's hand. If that guy with king 6 doesn't get out of line, I end up winning like $1,500 on the day instead. But not much we can do. Anyway, that's all. I will be going to Vegas at the end of this week, so we'll be getting some vlogs from there. All right, guys. Catch you later.